What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down the best quarterback throwing mechanics video in 2025. So we're going to be taking a look at this throw here from Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers checks every single box that a quarterback wants to check when it comes to their throwing motion and their throwing sequence. Now, again, every single quarterback is different. Every single quarterback has a different body type. Every single quarterback, maybe someone's taller, maybe he's a little bit shorter, maybe somebody weighs a little bit more. So the way you exactly throw the ball does not have to be exactly like Aaron Rodgers. But what we want to try to replicate the best we can is his throwing sequence, aka his kinetic sequence, his kinetic chain, because that is how rotational athletes efficiently generate power, can efficiently take pressure off their arm, and be more accurate with their throws. So that's what we're going to be trying to break down today. So I hope this is able to help. Now, whenever I work with a quarterback, break down a quarterback's film, talk about mechanical flaws in a quarterback, I always like to start with the base or from the ground up. And so with your throwing base, there's a position that you want to get to. You want to get to a position called being stacked. What that means is you want your head stacked on top of your knee and your foot. So you see how we have this straight line with his back foot, and you see how his back foot is located almost underneath his armpit. This is a perfect throwing base. You got about 60 to 70% of your weight on your back leg, and you're nice and light onto your front side. Now, why do we want to be this way? This sets us up for a position called dissociation. Dissociation is when your upper body is separate from your lower body, right? So your upper body is going in one direction as your lower body is going the other direction. But you cannot do that if you don't have weight on your back leg. Now, some of you might seem a little weird, like, why is that? I want you to think about a baseball swing, because how quarterbacks generate efficiency and power is exactly how a baseball hitter would generate power as well. So think about a baseball swing. You're holding the baseball bat. You would get in this exact same base. The phrase being stacked is actually a baseball term. I stole that from a baseball coach. So your head, your knee, and your foot being stacked. So the pitcher throws you a pitch. What do you do to the pitcher? You take a step to the pitcher and your front foot's down. But what do you do with the bat? You keep the bat back here, right? And you stay in your base with your back leg, because that's where your power is. But when your bat is back here and you're stepping to the pitcher, or you're just stepping down, that's dissociation. Your lower body is doing something separate from your upper body. But you keeping your baseball bat back here, staying loaded on the back leg, when that front foot gets down, what do? You pivot off the back foot, that back hip fires, and the bat like kind of whips behind, right? That's torque. And torque comes from dissociation. Same thing as a quarterback. So when a baseball pitcher pitches you a pitch, you don't take a step and have all of your body weight lunge forward, and then you're just going to be swinging all arm. The bat stays back. Your weight stays loaded on the back leg. So for QBs, when you take a step to your wide receiver, you want to try to achieve that. I tell my quarterbacks, pretend there's a flashlight on your back knee and a flashlight on your hip. And when you take a stride to the target, what you want to do is you want to try to keep the flashlight pointed towards like the sideline, if you will. Because when you have weight on your back leg and you keep that back foot underneath your armpit, what that allows you to do is rotate your front shoulder back. That's dissociation. When your front stride gets down, you want your shoulder, if you're a right-handed quarterback, your left shoulder to slightly turn, and you want to push the football back with your front hand, getting to some type of backstroke position. Now, Aaron Rodgers, when he gets to here, he has a very tight release. It's not exactly a perfect 90-degree angle. It's more of like an acute, almost 45-degree angle. That's totally fine. If you're more of a 90 guy, if you're a little bit higher of an angle, if maybe you're a little bit lower of an angle, that is totally fine. As long as that front foot is down, your front shoulder is rotated back, and you are keeping that back knee and that back hip pointed towards the sideline. To allow ourselves to rotate my shoulders back, you were in a great first part of your sequence. So remember, we want to be stacked. We want to stride, but when we stride, we try to stay stacked so my shoulders can rotate back, and this sets me up for one of the best parts of the throwing sequence, torque. Now, before we break down torque, you guys, if you're a quarterback watching this video, or even a receiver, we have 2-day-long training camps coming to 12 more states across the entire U.S. this offseason. So if you guys go to that very first link in the description below, that is where you can sign up. We are going to be coming out to Charlotte, North Carolina next. That camp is sold out. Then we'll be heading out to Austin, Texas. That camp is also sold out. The first 5 camps we did, you guys, sold out, and every single camp will sell out on this list within the next couple of months. The reason why it sells out is we limit spots. We have smaller group training so you guys can get as much training is possible, one-on-one coaching is possible. It's not going to be this huge camp with 300 people there. That's why these camps will sell out, so make sure you take advantage, guys. Then we'll be coming out to Las Vegas, Seattle, Chicago, Newark, Birmingham, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, if you're local to one of those cities, we would absolutely love to have you out. So check out that very first link in the description below if you'd like to sign up, train with myself and my staff coach for 2 full days. So again, guys, very first link in that description below. Let's get back to this video. So now we're talking about this position right here, right? That dissociation position. Front stride is down, your weight stays back, your shoulders go back, and you're taking that ball to some type of backstroke position. We don't want to lift the ball to 90. Right? We want to be in some type of position right before we get to 90. So now when that front foot's down, what do? You take this back hip, you take this weight that's on your back leg, and you transfer it to your front leg. Now, there are a couple things that register for different quarterbacks. Not every quarterback is the same. Not every analogy that I use will click, but maybe something a little bit different will click for you. So I'm going to try to give a couple different analogies for the things we're discussing here. Some quarterbacks like to think I'm going to drive and rotate with my back hip. Some quarterbacks like to think from this position, I'm going to open up my front hip because that will drive your back hip. Some quarterbacks think I'm going to pivot off my big toe and drag my foot through. And then other guys think this weight that's on the outside of my quad, I'm going to shift it to the outside of my left quad. All of those would be fine. But we just have to know that the hips and the transfer of weight from my back leg to my front leg is what brings the ball through. So you see how Rodgers is starting to pivot off this back foot. You see how his back hip is starting to rotate through. His knee is starting to drive through. This is the magic position right here, you guys. If you can get to this position where your back hip is ahead of your elbow and ahead of the football, that's how you are creating that whipping effect of your motion and aka torque. But also this takes pressure off of your arm. You are using your legs. A lot of QBs, the mistake that they will make, you guys, is they will get to this stack position. But when they go to that front foot, it's like, remember we talked about with that baseball swing, they'll lunge forward and they'll push. And so when that front foot makes contact with the ground, their knee is almost caving this way. Their head is shifting forward. They can't rotate their shoulders back. So what happens is when all your body weight shifts forward, your back foot, your back knee, your back hip, they all get left behind you. And so you're going to be throwing. And when you get to this position right here, the elbow and the football will be way ahead. They'll be like over here and your back hip will be trailing behind. That might get you a little bit of power, but it's not sustainable, you guys. It puts too much pressure on your arm. That's why it's so important that we stay back. We keep our weight loaded onto this back leg right here when my front foot gets down, because that will allow me to stay back with my shoulders, rotate back with my shoulders. And then when those hips fire through, the hip can come through before the elbow and before the ball. We want to almost think of it like we want a C shape right here with my elbow all the way down to my foot. And if you could get to this position, you guys, this is how we efficiently generate power. Now, from this position, this is where a lot of quarterbacks go wrong. What you want to think about is a lot of quarterback coaches put a lot of stress on like your wrist flick, wrist flick, wrist flick. When you're in this position, because you're using your hips now, there's going to be a lot of rotational force with your lower half. What we want to try to do is we want to try to stay stable with my upper body. A lot of quarterbacks at this point will have a very wild front shoulder. Their front shoulder will swing open, their left shoulder will swing open, and that can sometimes make the ball widen outside your frame and you'll be coming across. We want to try to stay as parallel with my shoulders and my hips to the target as possible. You want to keep your belly button facing the target, if you will. You want to keep your left hand up by your face. A lot of quarterbacks will take this elbow and drop it, pushing their release up high. So the reason why that's important is it doesn't allow us to get to a position called extension. Now, like I mentioned, every quarterback coach loves to talk about the wrist flick. It's not just about flicking your wrist. What you want to do is you want to have your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder extended to the target. And you can't extend properly if you have that wild elbow dropping or if you have that left shoulder swinging way open, because your arm is going to widen outside your frame or it's going to go high outside your frame. So if you can try when you throw, fellas, let's think about the throwing sequence, right? We get to my stack base. I take a stride. I try to keep that back foot under me when I stride. I try to keep my head back. I stay stacked so my shoulders can rotate back. Now my hips, my weight transfer, that's what brings the ball through. Now when the ball is coming through, if I could fight the urge to rip open and rip down and I stay square, All I got to think about doing is snapping that wrist. Snap the wrist, elbow, shoulder extended to the target, and we're going to be more accurate and on point because you're actually using your hips. And again, fellas, the whole goal of this video was to teach you how to generate power, sustainable power that's not using your arm so your arm can stay healthy, and efficiency. And efficiency is accuracy. A lot of QBs, because they don't, like, let's go back to the very root source of the problem. A lot of QBs, when they get to this position, what will they do? They push forward. So when you push forward and let's say that back foot, that back knee, and that hip all get left behind you and your shoulder can't close and that elbow is coming through ahead of your hip, what do you do for power? A lot of QBs like to pull their elbow down. A lot of QBs like to rip the shoulder open because that will give you power, but think about what that does to your release. It widens your release, it heightens your release, so we're missing high, we're missing wide, and it's all because of your legs and your hip sequence. It's all about when the hip can fire through in your motion, and we know the steps to make sure that that hip can fire through before your shoulders. So, fellas, this is a perfect mechanical example here from Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to play it full speed one more time. I think, again, every quarterback's different. Every quarterback has a different throwing motion, but there are some key mechanical elements that we could learn from Aaron Rodgers that we could add to our own game.